Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life. Welcome to the podcast. I have Rabbi Shoshana Meira Friedman. You might know her as Rabbi Shoshana online, and I'm really glad that you're here. We are friends in real life and colleagues online, and I'm just grateful that you're with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. I'm so excited to be here and just thinking about the time several years ago now when I listened to you on a podcast and my life was changed. So it feels really meaningful to get to be on your podcast.
Oh, I'm taking a minute for that one. Thank you. You have described yourself as a PDA adult, so I have some questions. First of all, if people ask you, what is PDA? How do you define it? And then how did you come to say, yeah, and this is me. This is how I define myself?
Great question. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to just explain the metaphor that is at the foundation of the PDA Safe Circle approach, which is how I teach and support PDAers of all ages and loved ones. So the way that I think about PDA is if you picture yourself in the middle of a circle, a metaphorical circle, everything inside that circle are the people, places, activities, things, self-care tasks, etc., that you can pretty much all the time engage with your body feeling regulated and safe. You could be high energy or low energy, but you're not in any kind of threat response. Everybody has one of these metaphorical circles with safe to our bodies on the inside and threat response being triggered by the things on the outside of the circle. But the antennae that guard the circle are different. And I use this metaphor of antenna to get at the heart of PDA and also as a really useful metaphor for understanding differences across neurotypes in general. So if you think about a neuromajority person who gets triggered, most of us will get triggered if someone almost gets into a car accident with us, right? Our body will have a physiological response. Or if we are given negative feedback and we weren't ready for it, or if something that we love is threatened, or if we're hurt physically, we will usually have some physiological fight, flight, freeze, something happen in our bodies that says, I'm in danger and I need to react. I call those antennas. So you have an antenna on the periphery of your circle. It's on the lookout for, am I physically safe or not? Is something I love threatened or not? Is my life in danger? Is a secure attachment being threatened? There are several we can come up with that are what I would say neurotypical or neuromajority antenna that pretty much all humans have. So for autistic brains, we've got some extra antenna. Is this an interruption to my monotropic attention that likes to go deep and long on something? Autistic people have extra sensitive sensory antenna to certain stimulation, and we also have extra antenna for understimulation in some senses. Most autistics will have something around routine or unpredictability, like having to go a different way home because of a road blockade can cause, even if it's small, but a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, some kind of threat response reaction in our bodies. And of course, there's more. So PDAers have these really sensitive antenna to losses of autonomy, even really small losses of autonomy, like being asked a direct question and someone expecting an answer. We have a really sensitive antenna around losses of control, even small ones. Like for me, the need to eat. Mm-hmm. Like my body needs to do this thing. I really don't want to do this thing. That can put me into a threat response. Or a kiddo at school, right, where there's so much loss of control and antenna are picking those up. Social equality or social status, right? So I'm drawing some of this language from Christy Forbes' work, from Casey Ehrlich's work. I like to talk about losses of equality or status because some of us are very high status people, and it's actually not enough for our nervous systems to feel safe when we're equal. We want to be high status, or we're very sensitive to any bump in our social status. So that could be, let's say somebody is info dumping and a loved one is trying to just have a conversation with them and is putting out more information about Minecraft or whatever it is. But in so doing, it sounds like that loved one is being the know-it-all about Minecraft. So that can tip the PDAer into a threat response, separate from the antenna that's interruption of the monotropic attention, which is the info dumping. So it's a way of getting clear about these different antenna. And then the fourth one that I add that I haven't heard articulated by other PDA advocates is around losses of co-regulation, even small ones. So I define PDA as somebody who has extremely sensitive threat detection antenna around their safe circle for losses of autonomy, control, social equality or status, or co-regulation, even when these are tiny and imperceptible losses to a non-PDA brain.
Right. And it would be imperceptible because that non-PDA brain simply doesn't have an antenna for it.
That's right.
So to them, it's invisible.
That's right. Exactly. Or to be really precise, I think all of us have antenna for those, for losses of autonomy and control, and to some extent status, depending on the person. But we're talking big losses, right? Everyone's going to be upset if they're in handcuffs. Everyone's going to be upset if they can't leave the house when they were really excited to because they have the flu, right? We all have that, but it's so finely tuned in PDAers. It is akin, I think it's actually useful to think of this as akin to autistic sensory differences. Everyone with sight can see light, but some of our eyes are excruciatingly sensitive to light. Everybody with a body has some threat response to a loss of autonomy if the loss of autonomy is big enough, but some of us have this excruciatingly sensitive antenna. The co-regulation one can look really different depending on the person. For a lot of little kids, it's about parents. And the way I think about this is it's kind of just to use just a hot metaphors for a second. It's like we have such sensitive threat detection systems. Our nervous systems have so much trouble regulating themselves that it is like somebody's on a balance beam, and a developmentally typical person will learn by the age of 3 or so how to do some of this balancing of their own nervous system on their own. And they can walk across this metaphorical balance beam of life, wobbling a little, but their body can balance their nervous system on their own. As for PDAers, like my experience in life has been reaching out to hold someone's hand. Reaching to my parents, reaching to my best friends in college, reaching to that special teacher every single school I was at, reaching to my boyfriend, reaching to my husband. It's like, where are you? Because if I don't have that person, I'm wobbly as heck. Developmentally, I have done a lot of work on that. I'm very resourced and not as disabled by my PDA as many other PDAers are. But it's still really there. Like my need for co-regulation is so different than I think a typical 42-year-old is. And then for many others, it could look like screens as the other thing instead of a person or an animal. But it's like, we're not just self-regulating organisms, and no one is. We're social beings. But again, it's about degree and how disabling it is to the person when they don't get it.
Yes. And the overlap, as you're naming, it's also about this particular cluster of experiences. Yeah. So someone might identify with one of those 4, and that would be like, oh, you might have elements of a heightened radar in that area, but you wouldn't really meet the full neurotype unless you meet all the criteria.
Right. And the other piece about this antenna metaphor that's really useful is it helps us talk about trauma, because when we have traumatic experiences, it makes our antenna, particularly antenna that were on fire and activated during the traumatic experience, it makes those antenna more sensitive. And my hypothesis, and the hypothesis of the PDA advocates that I see, right, is that this is an innate part of the brain wiring so that you can do extensive trauma work. And you can do EMDR, you can do somatic experiencing, really good embodied work that does release lived trauma from the body and still have these extremely sensitive antenna. Whereas
Yeah.
I have friends and children in my life and other folks who have had traumatic experiences, including intense developmental trauma, like extraordinarily horrible developmental trauma, who have done great trauma work, and they're not disabled. But I do not think there's any amount of trauma work that I can do or my kid can do that de-heightens these antenna to the extent that we don't need accommodations in daily life. And there may be folks who've been through trauma where that is also true of them. And then PDAers, most of us are traumatized developmentally, even parents who catch this very young, because it's just very hard to live in a body with this many antenna. And so the other part of the metaphor is arrows. So I use the language of arrows instead of demands because I think it's really useful to remind ourselves that the demand is in the eye of the body. And what we're actually talking about is, does this thing pierce into the safe circle and feel like a violation of the person's sense of safety? So I like the visual of an arrow being shot at your safe circle. So that feeling of hunger, that need to get dressed, screen limits for many people, the loss of status in a school setting or in a work setting, routines, all of these things, which typical folks would be like, that's not threatening. Our antenna perceive them as arrows. And then over time, those arrows being shot at our safe circle, it's a very visual metaphor, will shrink the safe circle. And that's when we get into burnout.
Yeah.
So that's the basics of the metaphor. There's more to it, but that's how I define PDA.
Yeah, let's carry the metaphor forward. I want to talk about you if we can. So, a lot of parents, a lot of listeners are really trying to understand, and I'm wondering if you could use the PDA Safe Circle approach as the metaphor, but tell us about what it feels like in your body. A present tense example.
Give you an example from today.
Okay, there we go.
So part of the metaphor, which I didn't talk about before, is hearts outside the circle. So a heart outside the circle is something that you love in your heart and in your head, but your body does not love. And PDAers have these so often. And for me, going on a walk with a friend is one of these. So a friend and I went on a walk this morning. I love this person. I love spending time with her. We're outside. It's like 80 degrees and sunny in Boston. We're in the Arnold Arboretum. It's green. My dog is there. The wind is blowing. I could not be happier. And as we're having this just back and forth conversation, my antenna around social status, around monotropic attention, around being asked questions, right? Like loss of control, around a sense of pressure, which is another, we can think about that as part of autonomy and control, but like that word is really big for PDAers. All of those are being activated, and my body is in a very mild form of flight. Meaning if I were to totally do what my body wanted, it would be to run away. When I came home from that experience of engaging with a heart outside my circle, where there were arrows jabbing at me, as your safe circle is getting stressed, you can get ejected from it. So now you're no longer in a regulated state. So after this walk, I then had a client, and I almost never do this. 2 hours of social interaction in a row for me is bonkers. After that call, I collapsed. Like I needed to lie down for an hour. That's not a typical nervous system. To be 42, basically healthy. I mean, I do have some underlying health stuff, but it's not that's not this. This has always been the case. And need to lie down after 2 hours of socializing with people you love.
And I think the important thing that you've already really clearly stated and that we both know to be true, which is nobody can look at you from the outside and be like, that's not too hard. That's fine. You can do it. It is not that kind of model. It's a very much an inside out, self-defined individual kind of approach.
And this is a big piece of the safe circle model that's so important, is that what's inside the safe circle is not what you can access. It's what you can access while your body feels safe.
Thank you for distinguishing that. Give us an example of how people get that wrong.
School is a really, really classic example. And I know so many of your listeners are parents. So kiddo can go to school. This is a classic PDA thing. They seem fine during the day. So we think, oh, school's inside their safe circle.
Mm-hmm.
But when they come home, they're in manic dysregulation for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's telling us something. It's telling us that they had a lot of pent up nervous system activation during the day that needs to be released.
Mm-hmm.
That means school is not actually in their safe circle. Their body is under stress because we're getting the data that home is really hard. And this was the case for my kid before burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the model is simple, but it's sophisticated. It's nuanced. So you could say, well, but my kid loves school. And I say, great, that's a hard outside their circle, just like my walk with a friend. And that is giving us information. It's giving us information that we can expect dysregulation or a contraction of the safe circle after engaging in that heart outside the circle. Mm-hmm. It's also giving us information that there are some really important needs for the heart and the head that are getting met by school, but that the body isn't regulated because of these insensitive antennae. Mm-hmm. And so we can get strategic. What are the arrows jabbing at us? This is my take on being a demand detective in your language. Mm-hmm. How do we mitigate and remove as many arrows as we can? Mm-hmm. And what do we provide, refrain from doing, and allow? Those are my three pieces to create safety for this person's nervous system. Mm-hmm. But it's very easy to look on the outside and think, well, they can eat. And so eating is in their safe circle. Uh-huh. Eating might be a profoundly stressful activity for this person.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a joke I see sometimes on social media where they're like, sometimes in the autism assessment, they'll ask you a question like, do you have an issue with socks? And you'll be like, no, because I have a system. Yes. And then the punchline is like, that's what they're getting at. Right.
Yes, I've seen that meme where that person.
You know what I'm talking about. Brilliant. Yeah. It seems exactly similar. Right. Like if it requires all of this extreme amount of effort and mental gymnastics for the PDA, it's really not in their safe circle. Yeah.
And safe circles can be very small. What's in them can be small. The safe circle expands and contracts depending on the arrows jabbing at it. When you sketch a safe circle, you can have things that are on the boundary. Mm. The boundary is different than hearts outside the circle because the boundary is when I have capacity, I can engage with this and feel great. So like for my kiddo going to the Museum of Science, there are days where that is just the thing to do. He does it. He's completely happy. He's completely regulated. He comes home. There's no safe circle contraction. There's no dysregulation. Mm-hmm. His safe circle, which is a metaphor for nervous system capacity, was simply big enough that day to go to the science museum.
Yep.
That is super different than a heart outside the circle, mm-hmm. which would be he would be dysregulated, but enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And it's also different than something that's outside the safe circle, which he either would not be able to access or he would be miserable doing it. The whole approach is kind of a map for working these things through.
Yeah, exactly. It's a map for safety and expansion.
Exactly.
That we're not stuck where you are, which is something that a lot of parents fear is that, well, if I accept this, if I sketch this nervous system, if my kid's circle is really small and I'm just like, okay, well, that's who they are. There's a sense that it's static or that it's leaving them as they are.
When we remove and mitigate arrows and we provide, refrain from, and allow certain things for ourselves as a PDAer or our child, we are actively allowing the circle to widen. So there's a great line in The Overstory by Richard Powers, which is one of my sacred texts, where one of the characters says, how do you turn a plot of land back into forest? Do nothing for longer than you think. Do nothing for longer than you think. Earth wants to forest. Earth loves to be a tree. So when we leave a land alone, plants will grow and forests will emerge in most places, climate change notwithstanding. Taking that metaphor to a child wants to thrive. They want to play. They want to be a contributing member of whatever group they're part of. They want to do self-care because they are human. This isn't something you have to teach. It's like a puppy will play. It is actually an innate part of our wiring as a species to be a pro-social member of a group. By pro-social, I don't mean neurotypical. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me that recently. I do not mean quote unquote social skills. I mean pro-social meaning not punching someone in the face, but taking space instead. I mean healthy stims that aren't self-harm. We want that in our deepest selves, the way that a puppy is wired to play.
Yep.
So there's this really whack idea in Western society that we have to somehow inject our children with those values and teach them to care about self-care or contribution. And that's really backwards as heck when it comes to human nature. It's actually the opposite, that the more pressure you put on a kid to do things they otherwise would do naturally, the more they get the message, oh, this isn't something I do naturally. It's not in my nature to contribute because someone keeps getting on my nerves about it. So to get back to that worry of if I do nothing, they'll just stay stuck. The image of the circle with the arrows jabbing at it invites you to understand that it is in the nature of that circle to expand when it feels safe.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like there's a little force pulsing at the center of the circle that is inherently
force that through the green fuse drives the flower. I can't remember the poet. I need to quote. I love, yes, exactly. And so the doing nothing, and this is why I have inside of my app, which is part of my community, you can access through an app or through a browser, and it has access to my whole PDA Safe Circle approach. And inside of the approach, there is what I call the accommodations menu, which has this list of what can I provide, what can I allow, and what can I refrain from doing to allow the safe circle to widen, to allow those antennae to relax so that this person can decrease their distress and increase their thriving.
Yeah. Okay, I want to bring this home. I'd love for you to tell us a story, maybe of a client or a family that began using this approach and just how that changed a specific challenge that they were facing.
I'm going to tell a story about toileting because it's such a
challenge
subject, and it's such a challenge. And families who struggle with their kiddo withholding poop or pee, it's this little club where it's so hard to talk about, and then finding each other is this really big deal. So I want to share that. So I have a client whose kiddo was diagnosed as autistic at 3.5, but they didn't figure out PDA until a couple years later. The presenting problem is that the kid is extremely withholding poop, like could be a week or more, and was really uncomfortable. It's very easy to get stuck just zeroing in on that. And what I do is bring us to the big picture. So the first thing that I did with this family is we inventory the kiddo's strengths. We ground ourselves in trust in this kid's pro-social nature, their human strengths, their atypical developmental process, their journey that is theirs alone and does not belong to the parents. Then we look at this challenge through element 2, which I call see the situation clearly. What the heck is actually going on? Element 2 is where so many of us have been gaslit. It's a corrective to the gaslighting. So first is we look at the situation through the lens of the PDA nervous system. This kiddo is likely feeling a loss of autonomy from their body's need to poop. They have no control over it. That's an antenna being activated. That's an arrow. And they're trying to equalize with the task of pooping by holding it in their body. So non-PDA interventions for this could include going to a medical clinic for kids who withhold poop and pee, but the attention from the medical professionals is itself perceived as an arrow by many PDAers.
Yeah.
And that will actually make the nervous system less able to release. So we have to see that clearly. And the second way that this family was able to see things clearly is through my lens of autistic brain wiring. So for PDAers who are also autistic, sensory stuff is a big deal. Pooping is just a big deal. It feels really intense. The other piece is that through the lens of autistic brain wiring that's really relevant here is developmentally, autistics have uneven skill sets, and most of us have developmental delay in one or more areas. That's part of the disability. This kid happened to have been parented by parents who did not know he was neurodivergent. And so they did toilet training the way you would for a typical kid when he was 2.5. And so what I was helping them see was, if we just see this clearly through an autism lens, he was not developmentally ready to be out of diapers. when he was just pure autism. He just wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leads to like a toileting trauma because it was such a hard process of toilet training. Then the third lens is see it clearly through the lens of cultural context, which is, oh, there was so much pressure on you as parents to toilet train him.
Yes.
Don't worry, he'll be out of diapers by kindergarten. Like, well, what if he's not? Yeah. Then element 3 was I supported them in sketching his safe circle. Now we're going to pull big picture, not just toileting. What's in this kid's safe circle? What's out? What's on the boundary? And let's just see how his nervous system capacity is doing overall. And one of the things they noticed was that sleep was outside it. We realized, oh, there's so much less trauma and power struggle around sleep that if we can bridge sleep into the safe circle, that will give this kiddo more nervous system capacity overall. Then with element 4, we get really granular. What, to use your language, like what is too hard in this kid's life? To use my language, what are the arrows jabbing at their safe circle? So for this family, a big stressor was going on around one of the parents working and coming and going from the house a lot. And every separation was an arrow at the kid's nervous system. So trying to rework a work schedule so that there might be longer times without the parent, but fewer arrows and less time with all that cortisol overall, right? This is not about poop because it's never about the thing that's hard. It's about the nervous system capacity and the threat response. And one thing that they realized was that the toilet was just ridiculously hard for this kid. Like he had been out of diapers way too early. And what, can we just drop the idea of a toilet and offer pull-ups or the freaking floor? And this is so, this is where like, I could never, I'm standing on your shoulders so powerfully here. Like I could never do this work or conceive of this without learning from you. What is most important here? It is not the toilet. It is getting the poop out of this kid's body. So helping them understand to thrive, this kid does not actually need to use the toilet. He needs the poop out of his body.
Yeah. Yeah. But it takes a lot of sophistication, like you just said, to pull those two things apart. The people think that those are the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay. So we moved the toilet. Another thing that came up, so we started pooping sometimes on the floor, started to be willing to wear a pull-up, but was still a lot of encopresis and a lot of struggle. So then we kept drawing the demand diagram and realized that every time he pooped, the mom was really anxious to wipe him. And that had become its own separate thing. And so we worked with the mom. How do we just relax? Okay, yep, this is like a big taboo. Talk about messages of being a bad mom.
Yeah.
There's literal poop on my kid for hours and I can't get it off. But we zoom out, the big picture, the most important thing is to get the poop out of his body, to decrease the threat response, to help him feel autonomous and in control over a bodily function that he needs to be able to thrive. So we're going to keep the hand sanitizer and the wipes around the house. This is so much what I learned from you. How else do we get the needs met for basic sanitation while there's poop in this kid's pull-up? Drop talking about wiping, apologize to the kid. So we removed the arrow of fear from him. I coached the mom in terms of getting low and saying, I'm so sorry I was pressuring you about wiping. It's your body. I'm here to clean you when you're ready. And what we saw over time with this kiddo was actually in a matter of, I think it was days of that conversation where the mom was like, it's really okay. Within about 2 days, all the power struggle around wiping was gone. And the kid was asking to be wiped. Because again, back to element 1, he doesn't want to have poop on him. He's a human. He also has the information that poop is yucky. He doesn't want poop. So like, all we need to do there is give the information, remove the arrows, allow that natural forest of his own thriving and desire to be well to emerge. Then it was also sorting through constipation and like just getting on, okay, there's not enough Miralax getting in him. How do we fix this? And one thing that we discovered that was really exciting with this family was to just pre-mix a pitcher of a bunch of doses of adult Miralax, but in a lemonade pitcher with the kid's favorite juice or powder mixed in. Because what we realized was that if you mix just Miralax in a cup, it's much harder for it to all dissolve, and it tastes weird. Like I've had Miralax, that's why I know this.
Yeah.
But it tastes weird. So if you just do it throughout the day, even though it's probably not medically what you're supposed to do, this family was able to get enough Miralax in their kid over time that his poop started to get softer. So now we're removing that arrow of the sensory discomfort of constipation. And most of all, it was giving the kid full autonomy over pooping after all of that trauma. And his encopresis dipped way down. His withholding went from a week to at most a day or two, usually not at all. And that's really powerful. And it really changed their life. There's other aspects to it. And part of this is always like element 6 is around accepting the disability and difference. Like, okay, so this family has an 8-year-old in pull-ups. Okay, this 8-year-old is cognitively brilliant and in pull-ups. Okay, we're going to do whatever grief work we need to do and keep focusing on that, what thriving looks like for this kid right now and his beautiful disabled body is to be able to poop without shame and without pain and without resistance, so that he can access the life that he wants to lead, which is not centered around poop. Guarantee you.
Yeah. I love the way that you just illustrated how the safe circle expands, because it's not about the end goal of I need to get this kid pooping on the toilet. It's I want this safe circle expansive.
Yes. It's all based on what does thriving look like for this person.
We've got a new resource out, a coloring book. Because it's so visual, because it's so sensorial, it's pretty easy to communicate it to kids too, to add to that sense of control and autonomy. Like they can take mastery over their own safe circle and have the same information as their parents do, if not more, about how they work. So tell us a little bit about the next steps. If somebody is eager to try out one aspect of the PDA Safe Circle approach, how would you recommend that they start?
Awesome. So 2 really easy ways. One is to grab my coloring book. And that's a free resource I'm putting out there. And then I would also just so welcome your listeners to try out a free week in my community, because it's a community of practice. Like you, I have a background in congregational leadership. So what I'm creating is a community. It's housed in Mighty Networks. You can access it on a standalone, beautiful app on your phone. Tap on PDA Safe Circle app on your phone and have access to it there. I offer a free week, and it's a way to get this wraparound sense of I am not alone. And here's a community of people using this language. And the feed is regulated as I don't allow venting. So you can bring your hard emotions, but not post from them. When I'm having a hard time, or I feel like the world doesn't understand me or my kid, I open my own app and I feel so delighted that there's, at the time of this airing, there's 160 people who are connected to me through there. And there's our individual safe circles, and then we are all nested inside the energetic field of the PDA Safe Circle community, which is then inside the circle of the neurodiversity community, which is inside the human rights, right, and the movement for a sustainable life on the planet. And I really feel those nested circles. So a warm invitation if you want to hop in and see how that circle feels for you. It's a low demand community. You can access it in whatever ways you want.
I love that. Thank you for practicing your generous nature by spending so much time with our podcast listeners. You started us on a personal note, so I will end it too, that I have really experienced this as part of your core nature is such a connector on the deep things that really matter to you and that really matter to me. And there have been a lot of days where even if I don't directly reach out to you, there's just like, there is somewhere in this world, Shoshana, and she cares about me.
About you. Yeah.
And that I co-regulate with the idea of you a lot. So
I really get that. We're in these invisible networks holding each other in this net.
That's right. Yeah. Just like the trees, we actually belong to each other in the underground places. What a delight.
Thank you so much for having me on.
If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives. I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.